It's January 13th, 2010. I want to welcome everybody to this morning's committee hearing. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Jan Perry. At this point in time, we do not have a quorum, but we will begin, and all actions taken until we get a quorum will be a communique from the chair. We have a light agenda where it relates to how many items. So with that, Ms. Barclay, we have 3 items on the consent calendar, which are items 1, 2, and 3. So if you could start with item 1, and then we'll roll.
Yes, sir. Meg Barclay, CLA. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to the change of names of 4 pre-qualified consultants. We have a recommended technical amendment to that to clarify the term of the Planning Historic Preservation List to be March 11th, 2009 through March 11th, 2012.
Okay, then we'll adopt the CLA report with the amendment.
Thank you.
And that'll be as a communique from the chair. That brings us to item 2.
Item 2, reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to modifications to the pilot foreclosure prevention program for Council District 7.
Okay, on item 2, we'll adopt the CLA report. Read item 3, and I have 2 cards from the public on item 3, but read item 3, and then we'll listen to their comment and move on.
Okay. Item 3 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department relative to rent escrow account program outreach contractor positions.
Okay, if I could get Johnny Utronich to come forward, and Jim Clark. Johnny, you're first.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
My name is Johnny Utronich, and I am the president.
I was close.
Yes, you were very close. You've probably been to San Pedro, I'm sure.
I was close. Yes, I have.
There you go. I'm the president of MCIA, and we represent the city inspectors. Mr. Chairman and members, the MCIA represents more than 1,000 LA City inspectors and investigators. It is on behalf of our members and the safety of Los Angeles residents and businesses that we ask for your very careful consideration on this motion. According to city housing officials, this program was not intended to put our city housing department inspectors at odds with REAP outreach service contractors. Outreach contractors are reportedly inserting themselves in the inspection process, causing our city-represented inspection employees to be working at cross purposes with the REAP contractors. Consequently, city representatives disagree on the status of apartment units, and on-site conflicts between our inspectors and REAP contractors have been all too common. Before approving any extension of their service contract again, we would urge your committee to clarify the role of REAP contractors, limiting their responsibilities to outreach and education of tenants only. We believe the safety of tenants is already properly served by our inspectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
I loved that. Jim Clark with the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. We represent 25,000 plus managers and owners of apartment complexes and units across the city and the county. I guess the only thing I can really say, I've got three points to make, but to me, and I hope it is to anybody who looks at this, a complete conflict of interest. I don't know whether it's stipulated in the RSO, but the culture is at the department that outreach groups get the final say-so on a building coming out of REAP, even after it has been signed off by the actual inspectors, who are the professionals in this situation. Having a tenant advocacy organization sign off a building coming out of REAP, I mean, again, is a conflict of interest. And if you look at it, they have huge motivation to keep these buildings under REAP because the rents are discounted by 50%. If the contracts are going to go outside, and I don't think they should, I think that it ought to be to a nonpartisan group that really doesn't do much, any work with tenants or owners. Again, why is the money going outside? I mean, we have perfectly capable, qualified, and trained inspectors. Why is it not staying in the department to keep those inspectors off of furlough or actually hire more? I see no reason for the money to go outside, especially with regard to the situation that the city budget, with the city budget. It's just not necessary. So again, conflict of interest, not necessary, keep the money in-house. Thank you.
Thank you both. So with that, as a communique from the chair, we'll adopt the Housing Department's report, but I also want to ask the Council President to refer this item to the Personnel Committee. It was a request by Councilmember Zine. Okay. Did they make it under the wire? Okay, well, here. Is he still here? Is that Richard? Mr. Richard Sanchez?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. And I've got another couple of them. Brett Terrell, please come forward. Richard, before you start, did somebody give you that jacket, or are you an alum of USC, or are you going to USC?
The first two. I'm just a great fan of USC ever since Mike Garrett grew up in the same neighborhood I did. And so
Well, I was going to...
watch out now. You have a friend of yours there.
Right? No, she and I were just having a conversation. I thought I would loop you in to our chat. Okay, now, what do you think about the Lane Kiffin hiring?
I wasn't too happy about hiring Mr. Kiffin, but after I'm hearing the assistant coaching staff that he's bringing on and bringing back Norm Chow, I think we're going to be doing just fine.
Okay, Richard. And you look good in that jacket.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank
now to business. Oh, wait a minute. Any other USC graduates? Oh, Jim, I didn't know that. I may call you two back up for questioning when I finish with Mr. Terrell. Okay, Mr. Sanchez, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. The reason I'm here on behalf of the Engineers and Architects Association, speaking on this item. I'd like to preface by saying that I come here with a level of expertise. I'm a retired Assistant Bureau Chief for the Department of Building and Safety for over 38 years. I also had approximately 10 years in charge of the code enforcement section for the Department of Building and Safety. And during that period of time, I put significant number of inspection programs together, several of which were recipients of Productivity and Commission Awards. It was always my knowledge and my attempts, matter of fact, and CD9 was one of the very first with the proactive code enforcement. The original program was very successful, extremely successful. In that, I read the background of the report from the Housing Department, and it gives a lot of reasons why we should continue or we should extend this contract to outreach groups. It's my opinion, it's our opinion, that the money that is being expended through outreach groups is a good thing. However, it can be better spent. It is imperative when we develop an inspection program that it be included within and integrated within, the outreach programs should be an integrated part of inspection. The outreaching of communities as well as organizations as well as council offices should be an integrated portion of the inspection staff. The expenditure of funds should be used in-house to further develop either electronically or through bodies in the inspection staff. So it's our position that you could better, it's a frivolous expenditure on outreach groups when you can do it better in-house. There was a conflict. The other gentleman just before me also indicated that oftentimes, and this has been my experience in speaking with staff, that oftentimes, and it's indicated in the report, they facilitate compliance to orders. That's the function of an inspector. and it's best done by inspectors or staff that know codes. It has been our experience, after speaking with staff, is that oftentimes, once the orders have been in compliance, that the outreach groups have a tendency to overrule the inspectors, and they don't have the expertise.
Thank you, Richard. Mr. Terrell? And then I have, is it Steve Ariando?
Thank you, Mr. Weston, Councilmember Weston. My name is Brett Terrell. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Inner City Law Center. And the work that we do on the outreach is very important for the program. The flexible hours, we work on weekends and evenings on this program where we can meet with tenants and landlords. And the information that we provide to tenants and landlords is very valuable. For example, I was at a building yesterday where the landlord wanted to know if he was done with the work, so I went out to take a look at it and saw that the paint hadn't been done yet. They're still peeling paint in all the rooms. If an inspector had come out to tell him that, he would have been billed $200. He's been able to save that money, and now he can get the painting done before the inspector comes. So that information to the landlords is very helpful for the landlords, as well as information that we provide to the tenants. And so we're not trying to take over the role of the landlords. Actually, we're providing valuable information to the landlords. We also help landlords when they're trying to get access to a unit for repairs. Many tenants don't know they're required to give access if they have a 24-hour notice. Many landlords don't know they're required to give a 24-hour notice, and so we get involved in those disputes and help make the arrangements, help set up the schedule for landlords to come in to do the repairs that are needed. And that's something that we can do because we have the flexibility of working various hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good morning.
My name is Steve Arredondo. I'm with the Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice. I want to speak a little bit about the process for the RFP. There was a lengthy application process in which over 20 groups applied. And the groups that were chosen were ranked based on a scoring system, as many of you are aware. And so the top 5 ranking organizations were selected. Now, I also want to talk about the cost effectiveness. As the report says, it's more cost effective to contract out to these organizations, and that's important because the reason why it's cost effective is because we provide we're an access point and a liaison to both tenants and landlords. As my colleague Mr. Terrell mentioned, we assist landlords in accessing information to them and programs that they can take advantage of that would help them make repairs to their property. We also, for all the outreach groups, their staffs are fully bilingual, and so they're also able to provide to help resolve language barriers between landlords and tenants. And so just given the cost effectiveness and what it costs the city to pay the outreach versus what it would cost an inspector, I think this is more than a bargain for the city of Los Angeles. And for those that disagree, they're just not understanding the project. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. We've been joined by Mr. Ed Reyes, Councilmember Ed Reyes. So we do, Mr. City Attorney, we have a quorum at this time. So unless Mr. Reyes objects, if we could add him on to the first 3 votes, and then that will be sent to the council as a recommendation from this committee. I want to again make sure that this gets referred to the Personnel Committee at the request of Mr. Zine. Okay, Jim, and where's the gentleman in the back? Come on up. Seriously. Yeah. No, come sit. And I'm certain that Mr. Reyes might be a tad distressed if there is truth to the rumor that Norm Child may be driving eastbound, headed back towards the Coliseum. Anyway, we have, just to make you feel comfortable, we have, not counting Miss Perry, these are two USC gentlemen, so I want to ask you to identify yourself and let me know what you think about the Lane Kiffin hire.
And they want a yes vote, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
My name is Jose Garcia. I'm actually the executive director of Inquilinos Unidos, one of the contracting agencies that we're talking about for REAP. Gonna miss the old coach, I guess, you know.
That's the best you could do? All right, your time is up, Jim.
Well, I'll mirror that, but, you know, it's a new day. I think there is truth to the fact that Norm Chow's coming back. He hasn't been able to get along with Rick Neuheisel, it seems. He didn't get along very well with Pete Carroll, but I think, you know, the three coming from Tennessee and Norm Chow, I think it's a great coaching staff. I'm very happy. I'm over my disappointment of Pete Carroll leaving.
Okay, good. All righty. See, at this committee, you learn. We have informed insiders from everywhere that will, you know, give you little cubes of wisdom. But anyway, thank you. And again, Mr. Reyes, I'm sure they will find another offensive genius for UCLA, because Rick Neuheisel is a great coach. All right, that brings us.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. That's a real confidence booster.
I think Ms. Barclay,
Yes, sir. She's going backward.
item 4.
Item 4 is a report from the LAHD and the City Administrative Officer relative to approving a new bond team for qualified bond underwriters, financial advisors, and trustees.
Okay, if we would have the appropriate people come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Angelica Samayoa with the CAO's office. I can provide a quick overview and then pass it on to the department. The CAO report that was prepared on this matter recommended concurrence with the Department of Housing Department's recommendations. They had issued a 2010 request for qualifications to select their new bond team for their department. A total of 14 proposals had been submitted, and 8 of these firms were recommended for funding. As the breakdown is as follows: there were 4 recommended to serve as bond underwriters, 2 recommended to serve as financial advisors, and 2 recommended to serve as bond trustees. These 8 qualified consultants would serve as the bond team for a period of 1 year from the date of approval of this action, with 2 one-year renewal options, subject to the satisfactory contractor performance and the city's needs. So our recommendation was to authorize the department to enter into all necessary agreements as needed to enable the consultants to serve as members of the bond team. The cost for these services will be paid through the bond proceeds, program income fees, and private funds provided by the individual project sponsors. The department does not directly pay the consultants. They're paid for through the individual bond transactions.
I'm Baskin Jansizian with the Housing Department.
I'm Tim Elliott, the Acting Director of Major Projects for the Housing Department.
Okay, what kind of outreach was done to, when we were trying to solicit these bids with firms in L.A. City and in L.A. County? And how many of these firms are from the local area?
Regarding the outreach, we conducted a tremendous outreach program because last time, 3 years ago, we were instructed to expand this process, and we did this time as well. We, first of all, we posted RFQs on our LHC's website. We publish in all local newspapers. We send mass emails to all financial institutions that we work with, and also the RFQs were sent to the following the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Minority Business Opportunity Committee, National Council of Women, and Brotherhood of Crusades. We sent our information to all these individuals.
Okay. And how many of the firms are local?
We received about 14 responded to our RFQs. From the 14, by local, do you mean whether they have office in Los Angeles or headquartered in Los Angeles?
Both.
Both, okay. We have one.
I guess the short answer is that none of the firms for financial advisor, which is,
Could you pull the mic a little closer?
Sorry. None of the firms that are being recommended for financial advisor are headquartered in Los Angeles.
Why is that?
Well, because most of them, the CSG Partners is from San Francisco, and San Francisco has a much more robust nonprofit housing business, and a lot of it's a sort of a niche business, and they have much stronger nonprofit organizations, and the industry has basically developed there to be a lot more sophisticated than we have. We've got some catching up to do, and the firms that are have the most experience at this in California seem to be located in Northern California.
So are we doing anything about that, like some training or, I mean, because we want to hire whenever we can, LA-based, LA County-based operations. I mean, is there anything that we can do to help? I'm assuming that out of the 14, that some of the ones that applied were from Los Angeles.
Right. There was one firm based in Los Angeles, and actually scored the least.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. Why is that? I mean, is there anything that we can do to correct that, or is that not our job to do that?
Well, I think there is certainly a capacity building thing, but we rely on these financial advisors very heavily because the people that buy our bonds are Chase and Goldman Sachs and Wells, and these are sophisticated transactions, and the one firm that was located in Los Angeles, they've done less than 5 multifamily deals between 1997 and 2009. So, we really look towards those outfits that have national reach and have experience in going up against the lawyers for these firms that do it every day. And we have a very short window. Once we get a bond allocation, we have to issue the bonds in 90 days. And a hiccup could be disastrous. I think the affordable housing business in Los Angeles has matured in the last several years, and I think that that will come, but we're not there yet.
I was just, interested in why we were having difficulty. Are there any other questions? Okay, then we've been joined by Councilmember Alarcon. Without objection, we'll adopt the CAO report. We'll adopt the CAO report and ask the Housing Department to report back in 60 days. So, thank you. That brings us to item 5.
Item 5 is a report from the LHD and the CAO relative to the 2010 calendar year Affordable Housing Trust Fund Notice of Funding Availability.
Yes. Okay, then I'm going to defer to you once I figure. Are you the odd man out?
I am, and I think.
She's against one.
I'm waiting.
Good morning, Helmy. Okay, why don't you open, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Perry to ask her set of questions.
The Housing Department is asking approval of the notice of funding availability for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for 2010. We have about $32 million available. We got permission earlier late last year to actually accept applications based on the draft guidelines, and we've received $127 million in requests for the $32 million that we have. So we're in the process of reviewing those. We're hoping to be able to come back with recommendations in a month or so, because we need to issue commitments to projects by late March that are seeking tax credits in Sacramento. We've made a series of recommendations this year to try to align our funding with the state funding or lack thereof, and take advantage of opportunities and try to stay away from the pitfalls that have befallen some of our projects in the last economic cycle. So there's a number of boosts and preferences that we wanted to give to try to encourage housing in areas that we haven't been able to reach, South LA, and then we want to encourage growth in high-cost areas too, where we haven't been able to reach. There's anecdotally we're seeing, some land prices from failed condo deals in places that we hadn't been able to develop housing before. So we're trying to adopt an approach that would give preference to those kinds of projects that we haven't been able to reach before. So I understand Ms. Perry has several questions, and we'd be glad to answer those.
Okay, before that, Mr. Alarcon, where did you go to college?
You're making a big assumption there.
No, I mean, I know you went. You're brilliant. Where did you go?
Cal State Northridge.
Okay, so you didn't go to UCLA. So you're not depressed this morning like Mr. Reyes that they...
Hey, wait a minute. Who said I was depressed? Who said I was depressed?
Losing Norm
Change could be good.
as their offensive coordinator. Ms. Perry has a series of questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I asked a series of questions last week, so this is sort of a continuation of that. And I think last week I referred to HACLA developing a separate application process for project-based vouchers, independent of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Permanent Supportive Housing Program. And I wanted you to talk about that.
Well,
Do we have a HACLA person up here too? Yeah, okay. Yeah. HACLA and LAHD, if you could both answer that question.
No.
From the HACLA perspective, we're not issuing a separate NOFA RFP for project-based vouchers. We'll be working in conjunction with LAHD, CRA, and others on those issues.
What about housing?
Yeah, we were not aware that HACLA was issuing a separate RFP, and we've been working closely with HACLA on making sure the pipeline is, we're working together as agencies.
Right. There was some discussion about that last year, but our understanding is that the voucher business is volatile, that as people lose their jobs and the vouchers become more expensive, and there's a fixed amount of money to go around. And Mr. Kane could explain more, but that's been what's been explained to us is that they're just not in a position to do that at this time.
Now, the LAHD report indicated that there was a separate process.
Right. There was some discussions about that.
It wasn't written in the report. So what caused the change in things?
Well, what HACLA is basically saying now that they're just not in a position to offer. They've stopped issuing new vouchers because each voucher, and lots of the vouchers have gotten more expensive, and they're just trying to keep the folks in the housing that they've got, and they're not able to issue new vouchers. So there was in the NOFA there was some discussion of how to deal with those projects that had commitments. If our two NOFAs were running simultaneously, that we would wait until HACLA had made its decisions before we made the recommendations, because a project that has rental assistance can afford a bigger mortgage, and But if they're not going to get that assistance, it changes the amount of money they would request, the gap that they would request for us and how they would be ranked, so.
Go ahead.
May I just, if I may, there is an interagency agreement between LAHD and HACLA working together on the Permanent Supportive Housing Program. We have an interagency Permanent Supportive Housing Working Group. One of the things that we're finding as we move forward issuing a joint NOFA is that the decision-making processes and concerns between the two agencies differ. LAHD's dollars go in first, the vouchers go in later. And so we are still addressing some of the differences in the way the agencies make decisions, but we're working very hard to bring them into alignment so that we don't have this inconsistency in our approach.
This is a question for HACLA. Project-based Section 8 vouchers that would be available over and above the commitment for the Permanent Supportive Housing Trust Fund. Are there any available?
At this time, they're not. As we have gone to each council office and discussed our issue with Section 8 as our costs have increased and we're fully leased up, there are not additional vouchers that we can put out on the street in the way of project-based vouchers.
Okay, I'm concerned that HACLA is not able to coordinate with the city's housing goals, and I'm going to ask HACLA, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
HACLA and the Housing Department to report back to HCED when the trust fund results are considered on the status of the HACLA application process for project-based vouchers. If you want, I can repeat that. You want me to repeat it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm concerned that HACLA is not coordinating with the Housing Department goals. My motion or my request is to instruct HACLA and LAHD to report back to this committee when trust fund results are considered on the status of the HACLA application process for project-based vouchers. I also asked last week a couple of questions to the Housing Department and wanted to know if you're prepared to answer my questions today, or do I need to wait until the trust fund results are before committee?
I think we're prepared to talk about the two questions, the other two questions that you had.
Okay.
And I think that your office has received the same form letters that we have from service providers regarding the transition age youth. This is the NOFA we're talking about now is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund NOFA. We also have a Permanent Supportive Housing NOFA, which will be coming forward with in the next funding cycle. But the concern of the developers and service providers was that they wanted to be able to house these transition age youth in our traditional family housing developments, and they also made mention of the state homeless youth program, which is funded by Prop 1C, and that program they're still issuing commitments on that, but the issue is that the commitments are so conditional that no lenders will close, because that's permanent financing that comes in after the building's built, and nobody believes that the state is really going to have those funds. And so projects that rely on this homeless youth program, it says that they have to provide rental subsidies because these are kids with no income, and that they need intensive on-site services and high client staff ratios. Now, these are not things that we typically find in a regular affordable housing project. The supportive housing program, on the other hand, we partner with HACLA. There are vouchers. The whole thing is designed around a service plan that has on-site services for intensive needs of people that have dual diagnosis or severe emotional disturbances, things like that. That program is designed around that. The regular affordable housing is for families or seniors, and we just feel that it's more appropriate to go through that program, and that program's just not out right now.
Let me ask you a quick question, because I have been contacted by several housing organizations regarding this exact issue, the NOFA and transitional age youth, and they have raised an issue that the NOFA needs to be aligned and clarified with other funding sources, such as the state of California's Housing and Community Development Multi-Family Program, and of course the Mental Health Services Program.
So I think what I'm not saying it's disingenuous what they're talking about, but we're saying our program, that the affordable housing program, excludes populations that need intensive services, and the state homeless youth program, by its very nature, is intended to serve people that need intensive on-site services, and these are not things that we, with rental subsidies, and these are not things that we normally find in our regular affordable housing developments. And so we think that it's, there's a very rigorous service plan review. So if you're taking money from the homeless youth program, you really can't say that you're not serving that population. And we have a program for that, and it's not the affordable housing program, it's the supportive housing program. And we just feel that it's most appropriate to serve that kind of clientele in facilities that have the amenities that are needed for that population. And we'll be coming forward with an OFA in April for that program. So,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just close with asking the Housing Department to report back to this committee regarding the establishment of a recruitment radius for housing constructed with affordable housing trust funds. I want to have a way that we can provide residents of communities that the new housing is being built in to at least have the first opportunity to access that housing. So can we do that?
Yeah.
Well, our policy people have looked into this question because it's come up from time to time, and what we're being told is that the state, this multifamily housing program and the transit-oriented development program, and these are the ones that the outside state funding basically allow a local preference, but only within the jurisdiction's boundaries. And the home funds that we get, which are the primary source of federal funds that we use for these programs, you can only have a local preference if you also extend it to people that work in the community. So if we would develop such a policy as a radius, a tighter radius around the existing the developments that are being built, it would put us at odds with the state funding sources who provide the lion's share of the money. So
I think
maybe
you
we
can
could do a policy that's in conformance.
right there. I mean, you could do selective marketing.
Can you bring us something back to let us take a look at and discuss?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, before, I know Mr. Reyes has a statement. Norm, I forgot to call you up, so I want you to come and represent Bill. I forgot all about you. I apologize. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Your knowledgeable deputy, Mr. Westall, has a motion that was developed yesterday in concurrence with housing, addressing previously it's proposed in the report that Lincoln Place, which had a $4 million allocation, which was made directly by Councilman Rosendahl and yourself at the council level. In the report, that $4 million is being proposed for de-obligation, but allowed Lincoln Place, their owner, Aimco, to apply on a competitive basis, which they have done and have an application pending. In discussions yesterday, a motion is being proposed that would address some policy issues that we'd like a report back on from our friends in housing, to essentially look at some policy issues that we think are important to review.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reyes.
I know we are in a state of transition from one administration to another. We're looking at how we are posturing ourselves with our ability to compete at the state level, national level, given what little there is at this moment. But still, we have to get ready for this year, next year. My question is, in this discussion and listening to this dialogue, there was a 5-year housing plan that was put in place. I believe it was last year. I'd like to get a report back as to how this discussion and how does this fit within that 5-year plan. If we're going to be looking at these policy shifts or looking at these issues, how does that fit in the 5-year plan? There were certain expectations made. There was a certain strategy put in place that we adopted as a city. And so what does that mean given this dialogue? I mean, where does it fit? How does it fit? Are we positioning ourselves to be in the best position to compete nationally? With the new administration, they have an orientation, I believe. They have a perspective that they are cultivating. I'm not sure if they're very clear as to what they're going to do yet. I was in Washington this past week, and I was having these discussions with different folks in HUD, and they're trying to figure out a way to reach us and get the money onto the streets. So in this 5-year plan, what does this mean in terms of how we're treating these funds and these RFPs, and how does that fit within the 5-year plan? I just like to get a sense of continuity, if there is one, if there isn't, why, and what's the strategy there, and are we positioning ourselves to be in the strongest place to compete at the federal level? So that's just something we can get a report back.
Fine. Mr. Alarcon?
Yes. Last time this item came before us, I raised the issue of the 5% set aside from CRA tax increment that goes into the Housing Trust Fund. And I wanted to have a report on how that money has been spent since that policy was created in, I think it was 2003, whether it is going back to the districts, the CRA districts, according to the law. I have a report, and so I want to thank the department for preparing this report for the 7th Council District. Although it only indicates the projects that have been done, and it doesn't say how much money was contributed out of the essentially 7th District Community Redevelopment Funds. So is there any way I could get that information? And I also would like to see this citywide.
We can provide that information. The set-aside funds the 5% funds are 5% of the CRA's money on top of the housing money, on top of the 20% money that is generated from each project area. And what the trust fund does is that if we get an application that rises to the level of being recommended, and it happens to be in one of those areas where there's funds available, those would be the first funds that we use. And
but what is there a balance?
well, there's
It says 3.6 million has been used for projects in my district, and I have to believe since 2003 the amount was much higher than that.
right. That's just the 5% money.
So where's the other? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is since 2003, the set aside just from my district alone, the 5% is much higher than 3.6. You've only utilized 3.6 of that money in my district. I'm wondering what happened to the other money.
Yeah,
and how much it is.
We can provide a report that shows the balances, the amount that has been put in from the CRA into the Housing Trust Fund since the...
And so is it set aside?
It is not...
If it's not being used, why are we continuing to... If it isn't being used,
yeah.
Well,
why would we continue...
$30 million...
Why do you keep interrupting me?
Okay, sorry.
If it is not being used in whole, why are we continuing to contribute the 5% out of the CRA?
Well, it has been used, and the conversation about the 5% allocation is a separate question. I think it's more of a policy question. But the money has been used.
What does that mean? That's a policy question. I'm raising it right here as a policy issue.
I will say, what I'll say is, at the time that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was established, one of the sources of fundings that was allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was 5% of redevelopment tax increment monies from every project area. We have done extensive work to make sure that the redevelopment agency is engaged in the decision-making process for the allocation of those funds, and those funds, by law, are always spent in the projects in which they're generated, where their funds are generated. The conversation about how to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is, I think, a broader policy question. Is this the right way? It has been a way to do it, and it has been working, sort of. But I think that we do constantly have a discussion with the CRA internally at the staff level about whether this is the best approach and the right approach. And so I think it is a...
I'm not even questioning the decision to do this in 2003. This had to do with the state taking additional money and all kinds of other things. What I am doing is raising a new policy question, which is, if we are not spending the money that was allocated, why are we continuing to allocate?
I think we need to better...
When I could use that money for economic development.
We need to provide you better information about how the money was spent and how much money there is and whether it was spent.
There was once a balance of about $30 million, and that's been spent down, at the end of last year, was spent down to almost nothing. And we have, the money's collected in the last fiscal year, and that's about $11 million. And in this next funding round, we're hopeful to use a lot of that money and for trust fund projects in various areas. So there are some and there are some discussions with CRA about it, that the funds aren't used in a certain period of time, that the money could be used more in their region, so that we can...
They have to be used in the region.
Right, no, but I mean, there's individual project areas, and if it can't be spent in those individual project areas, then it could go to the wider CRA region. But that's a discussion that we're having for the MOU that's being negotiated right now.
I think it's a discussion you need to have with council, and that's why I want the report. And so can I move that we get a written report from housing as to where all that money went, and if there's any remaining, how much is it by district? Because if we're not spending the money, I could sure use it for economic development projects, particularly given the latest concerns about the state budget.
I will say that the allocation of 5% of tax increment, which makes the redevelopment agency contribution to affordable housing 25% rather than 20%, which is their statutory requirement, does make Los Angeles more competitive for federal funding and state funding, because we are contributing more to affordable housing than is required by law.
But my district is spending over 30%, so we're already at the 25%. We don't need to take an additional 25%. We're doing more than our fair share of the housing, carrying the housing load in my area. We don't need to do an additional 5%. I need it for economic development, because now over 30%, and I think it's something like 33% of the money is now being spent on housing projects, and the economic development projects are not being reinforced. In addition to that, these are for rental projects. I have a housing program that you're well aware of that seeks to lower the principal on foreclosed properties and keep people into home ownership. And this money was never raised as a possible effective utilization, because it's stuck in this rental category. But that's money I could have used to save people in their homes right now instead of waiting for a development.
I think we should show you the fund balances. I think that would be appropriate.
Well, I think Mr. Alicorn asks a fair question. That's my understanding. In the next couple of weeks or so, we're going to be discussing the trust fund reauthorization, and what is it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? 2 or 3 weeks. I would think when that discussion takes place, that would give you enough time to have all of the answers, and then maybe we could get some answers back in a couple of weeks. Richard?
I mean, I'll be very frank. I'm going to be looking to that money to see how we can save people in their homes that are being foreclosed on. So I want the department to work with me, not against me. But that's what we would do if the money was in the CRA, under CRA control. That's what I would be working with CRA to do with it. In fact, they already contributed $1 million to the project. If we did $2 million, we could save something like, I think it's 40 homes per million. We could say, I'm sorry, 25 homes per million. With $2 million, we could save 50 homes. And with $1 million, you're not going to build 25 homes or apartments. I guarantee you that. I've never seen those kind of numbers.
Okay, thank you. There appear to be no other questions, so without objection, we'll adopt the CAO report with the amendments. And Ms. Barclay, if you could summarize the amendments?
Yes, I can summarize the amendment that was provided to me. It was a instruction to LAHD to report back within 30 days on methods to encourage inclusion of income-restricted units as part of mixed income projects, including that include public benefit characteristics. That in connection with that report back to the council, that the LAHD provide some information on their evaluation of the current submittals under the current NOFA on how mixed income public benefit criteria would have maybe changed the ranking of the current, of those proposals that are currently before the department, and that LAHD staff recommend to council for the spring 2010 NOFA potential mixed income public benefit criteria for inclusion in that NOFA. And then restating Ms. Perry's request to instruct the housing department to report back at the time of the recommendations for this? On the recruitment ratio. Recruitment radius for housing construction with Affordable Housing Trust Fund money.
Okay. Then without objection, we move it. Ms. Barclay, is there any other business before this committee?
No, sir.
This committee is adjourned.